Hello and welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. We know we have folks tuning in from all across the country and beyond. Thank you so much for being here for our final day three of our webinar series, the Pride Study Wrapped Research Year in Review. We've had such a great time being in community with everyone these past few days and super excited to be here today to hear about a really impressive portfolio of research around eating disorder symptoms in LGBTQIA plus communities. For brief introductions, I'm your host today. My name is Daniel Moretti. I use any pronouns with positive intent. I am Program Management Director here at the Pride Study and PrideNet. And for a brief visual description of myself, I have brown curly hair, light brown skin, a brown mustache, and I'm wearing a pink shirt with pink flower appliques. I'll go ahead and pass over to my colleague Elle.
Thanks, Daniel. Hi, everyone. My name is Elle. I use he and they pronouns. I am a coordinator for the Pride Study, and I'm helping with tech support today. So you probably won't hear from me again, but I'll be here. And a brief visual description of me is I am white, I have a beard, I have short, ashy blonde hair, I'm wearing a white t-shirt. I have a nose ring. Great to be here. Excited to hear from Dr. Otmar.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Ellen. Huge thanks to Elle, who is going to be helping on the back end, sharing links in the chat. If anyone needs any tech support, feel free to message Elle, who is under the name The Pride Study, parentheses L in the chat. Great. Just a few Zoom housekeeping notes. So we are on webinar mode. So you can use the chat, but the chat will only be shared with the hosts and presenters if you want to send any messages or questions to hosts and presenters. You could also use the Q&A function if you want to submit questions for our presenter today. If you're doing the Q&A function, you also have the option to ask a question anonymously. When you open the box, there's a dialog box that has a little mark, send anonymously. Also, we have our captions turned on. So if you want to show captions or the transcript, feel free to click those buttons on your toolbar as well. Um, the agenda today, so we're going to do some welcoming remarks. Dr. Otmar is going to go into a portfolio of research, sharing the research findings. We are going to have time for Q&A, so make sure at any time during the presentation, type your questions into the chat or use the Q&A function. We'll make sure to get to those in the Q&A. And then we'll have some closing remarks. So don't miss out towards the end of the presentation as well. Wanted to give a brief content notice. So studies being presented today might include sharing data around experiences of either trauma, violence, discrimination, or substance use. So we encourage you to please practice self-care in the way that's most supportive of you. We understand if you need to step away from the presentation or the webinar at any time. We'll also be recording the webinar, so we'll be sure to share the link so you can always return back to it if you please. As we've been doing the past few days, thanks to the graciousness of our presenters, they've made available a PDF of their slides. You can use the QR code on the screen or the link in the chat that Elle kindly dropped. You can download the slides from today as well. And I wanted to give a little bit context on who we are at PrideNet and the Pride Study based out of Stanford University School of Medicine. So we'll start with PrideNet. This is our national community engagement network. We work together to catalyze LGBTQIA plus health research. And the ways that we do that is we connect LGBTQI plus community members with ways to meaningfully participate in trusted research. But really importantly is we make sure that community input is infused to every step of the research process. So everything from the questions that we're asking to sharing back the results of the findings in ways that are hopefully meaningful to the community, such as the webinar that we're doing today. You can learn more about PrideNet and the work that we do on our website, pridenet.org, and Elle has also put that in the chat. And then who we are at the Pride Study and what the Pride Study is. So we're also based out of Stanford University School of Medicine, and we're very proud to be the first national online long-term health study and when we of LGBTQI plus people. And when we talk about health, we mean it in a very holistic sense. So we're looking at physical health, mental health, and social health. And we are very excited that we are now in our 10th year of longitudinal data collection. So many thanks to all of the participants, like many of you who are on this webinar, our networks, our partners, our ambassadors, our participant advisory committee, our researchers who have made this possible. The Pride Study is created for us and by us, so created by LGBTQI plus providers and researchers, and for the benefit and health of LGBTQI plus communities. And participating in the Pride Study is the primary request that we have is completing an online annual questionnaire. And that's how we're studying health over time. It takes about 45 minutes to complete because we have very important questions across all domains of health. And it's very wide availability because it's an online survey. So eligibility criteria could be anyone in the US or territories who identifies as part of the LGBTQIA plus or another sexual or gender minority community, 18 years or older, and comfortable reading and understanding English. If you're not already, we hope that you'll join us and be one of the many 30,000 plus participants and help us reach even more participants. Elle has dropped in the chat where you can learn more at pridestudy.org. So I know I shared a lot in terms of from the perspective of working with the Pride Study and Pride Net team. Wanted to hand it over to one of our participants in the Pride Study who very kindly worked with us to film a profile to share more about what the Pride Study means to them. So I'm going to go ahead and play this short video.
I am a participant in the Pride Study. Hi, my name is Chris O'Grady. My pronouns are she, her. I am Stanford class of 2012, and I studied sociology with a focus in poverty and inequality. I'm an enrolled member of the Monacan Indian Nation, and I love being in the Pacific Northwest because Portland has the 9th highest urban Indian population in the country, and so there's a really thriving Native community here. The Pride Study is important to me because it represents a shift, which is an intentional act of reclaiming data through data sovereignty. Oftentimes, our communities don't have access to our own data. And so this is a real opportunity to also have a collection of that data with a cultural lens. Being a participant in the Pride Study, knowing that it is community driven and community focused, is empowering. I have faith that our stories are being told as a community and they're being uplifted. And no matter what social climate we're in, we do have information for our community to shape resources for us, by us.
Well, huge thanks to Chris and our 30,000 plus participants who all make the Pride Study possible and health research to support health equity for our communities. Well, I am very excited to go ahead and move us along into the main main attraction for today, our presentations. I'm going to introduce our presenter. Dr. Christopher Otmar is a postdoctoral fellow in the Department of Pediatrics at the University of California, San Francisco. He earned his PhD in interpersonal communication from the University of California, Santa Barbara in 2024. His research examines how close relationships shape health over time, with current work focused on social exclusion and binge eating symptoms in adolescents. He also studies the social health of LGBTQ adults and how interpersonal experiences in adolescence may influence health and well-being across the lifespan. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Otmar to our virtual stage. I'm going to invite Dr. Otmar to go ahead and introduce himself, provide a visual description, and please go ahead and jump into the presentation when you have chance. Thank you.
All right. Hey, everyone. Can we all see that?
Looks
Okay.
great. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Daniel. My name is Christopher Otmar. As a visual description, I am light-skinned, wearing a blue shirt with short brown hair and glasses. Um, as Daniel mentioned, I am a um, postdoc at UCSF. I work with Dr. Jason Nagata, who is an associate professor here in the Department of Pediatrics. And I just also want to start by saying that the research we've seen this week during the Pride Wrap webinars has truly been inspirational. Everyone's doing really meaningful work. And I feel honored to present amongst such wonderful scholars. All right. So, I also want to express my deepest appreciation for the Pride community, both the participants and the staff that make this research possible. You'll also see a list of co-authors on the screen. I didn't do the work that I'm presenting today alone. So we have folks here that helped at UCSF, UC Berkeley School of Public Health, the University of Kansas, and a host of other universities across the country and a few international scholars as well. Today, I'm going to be talking through three connected projects and that I, along with the primary researcher, Dr. Jason Nagata, worked on through this ancillary project. And we've been working on this for about a year and a half or so. We've published 6 papers, but there's 3 main projects. First, I'll be defining eating disorders and how they differ from eating disorder symptoms and behavior, and also explain why the LGBTQIA plus community may face elevated risk of eating disorder symptoms. And then I'll dive into our 3 projects and wrap up with some future directions on about this line of research. Okay. So first, it's important to say that eating disorders and disordered eating can affect anyone of any size, body shape, gender, sexuality, age, or background. Um, Eating disorder symptoms are linked to a host of medical risks, such as heart strain, digestive issues, hormonal changes, and something that we probably all know is that it's also linked to mental health risk. And this includes depression, anxiety, and thoughts of suicide. One particular consideration when discussing eating disorder symptoms among the LGBTQIA plus community is that it intersects with stigma, discrimination, safety, access to affirming care, and different body-related pressures. So, as medical researchers, we're especially concerned with how eating disorder symptoms are measured. And we need to measure them carefully, especially among LGBTQIA populations, considering the unique intersections of stigma and body-related pressures this community faces. So first, what is an eating disorder? And so an eating disorder is a clinical condition involving persistent disturbances in eating behaviors and related thoughts or emotions that can cause impairment or distress. And so you'll notice that this includes both the psychological, cognitive, as well as behavioral elements of distressing relationship with food or eating. Typical examples, the 3 most common eating disorder are anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, and binge eating disorder. Now, for a clinical diagnosis requires being assessed by a trained clinician or medical professional. And so most research surveys measure symptoms rather than trying to diagnose anyone. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. And so an eating disorder versus a disordered eating symptom or disordered eating symptoms, a lot of people live in the subclinical range where symptoms still matter for health, but may not reach the threshold of an eating disorder, a clinical diagnosis. Um, and so some people think of eating disorders as only including restricting your eating or vomiting or purging food. And this is not the case. There's a lot of different disordered eating symptoms that individuals can present, such as restricted eating, overeating, compulsive exercise, muscle building behavior, or even strict food rules. Um, and so disordered eating can be harmful even when it doesn't meet the clinical diagnosis of an eating disorder. And different LGBTQ plus communities show different symptom clusters. And some of these are less discussed. And so we're going to be talking about some of those today. And so prior research generally shows that LGBTQIA individuals experience higher rates of disordered eating and eating disorders than their cisgendered heterosexual peers. And something we've talked a lot about in the previous two webinars is a framework called minority stress or stigma-related stress. And these are feelings of difference that can raise stress load. Stress load oftentimes raises our risk for multiple health outcomes, including disordered eating. And so stress from stigma and interpersonal discrimination can build up over time, and people may feel pressure to look a certain way or potentially feel accepted and safe in a particular environment. Um, and chronic stress exposure can also increase things like body surveillance, appearance pressures, stress and coping via certain eating behaviors, barriers to affirming gender care, as well as mental health burden that might co-occur with eating disorder risk. And so we know, especially in the current political climate, that finding respectful, affirming care and environment can be hard. So I'd like to emphasize that the risk is more about the world that people live in. It's not a personal failure by anyone if they're at risk for an eating disorder symptom. Something that comes up also with studying eating disorders and the LGBTQIA plus community is the so-called idealized body. And so, as I'm sure we all know, the idealized feminine body tends to be thin and lean, and the idealized masculine body we think of as more big and muscular. And this is also intersects with transgender, non-binary, and gender diverse people, specifically that they may perceive a mismatch between one's own body and gendered body ideals, and this could lead to body dissatisfaction. So, for example, transgender women may feel that there's this thinness ideal that they need to accomplish or suppress certain secondary male characteristics. So, our projects were really looking and trying to answer three main questions. The first question was more on the measurement side. Do the questions used to measure eating disorder symptoms work the same way for different LGBTQIA groups? And the second question kind of builds on this by asking, what do typical scores look like in different groups? And then finally, our last series of papers identified how these patterns might differ across the lifespan or differ based on your age. And so why we were interested in conducting this research and answering these three questions specifically is because historically, a lot of eating disorder research and screening tools were built primarily in samples that were younger, often female, often cisgender, heterosexual, and white. And these groups are absolutely at risk for eating disorder symptoms and an eating disorder diagnosis. However, the LGBTQIA plus communities are also underrepresented in eating disorder research. And there remains a gap in our understanding about LGBTQIA plus adults and eating disorders, especially in how we measure eating disorders. So, um, as scientists, we can't assume a measure behaves the same way across groups without testing it. And so our three projects focused on a newer form of measurement called the Eating Pathology Symptoms Inventory. This was created about 10 to 12 years ago by Dr. Kelsey Forbush at University of Kansas. She is a clinical psychologist that specializes in eating disorders. And the Eating Pathology Symptoms Inventory, or the EPSI, is 45 items long. It captures behaviors over the past 4 weeks. And it's so long because it tries to assess 8 different unique eating disorder symptoms. Um, and the reason that we were especially interested in this particular measure is because it also assesses under-measured eating disorder symptoms, such as muscle building, excessive exercise. It goes beyond just purging or restricting food. And so it's important to note that this measure that we are looking at is only symptoms. It is not a diagnostic tool, and it doesn't have a clinical cutoff. So the EPSI lets us essentially look at different symptom clusters rather than collapsing everything into one eating disorder severity score. So in that way, it's incredibly useful for researchers. And our results kind of hinge on these 8 different symptoms that the EPSI captures or measures. So I want to go through them quickly. So the first is body dissatisfaction, and this is distress about one's body or shape or weight, primarily a psychological distress. It was the most commonly endorsed eating disorder symptom in our sample. I can talk more about that later, though. So we have body dissatisfaction, primarily psychological. We have restrained eating. This is mental effort that an individual may have to avoid high-calorie food. Again, more psychological. Oops. The third is purging, which is kind of the more classical eating disorder symptom that we think of. This is vomiting food or getting rid of it once it's been consumed in some way. And so that was assessed, as well as binge eating. Binge eating episodes or binge eating behavior. This is characterized by eating large amounts of food in a short amount of time. Binge eating is typically associated with a loss of control during a binge eating episode. And it's often characterized with feelings of shame or guilt or regret once the binge eating episode is over. And it's also important to note, or as a reminder, that these are not one-off experiences. These are patterns that participants reported over the past 4 weeks. So this wouldn't just be one binge eating episode, for example. It would be multiple over the past 4 weeks. The next is restricted eating. This is skipping or limiting intake of food in order to influence your weight. Excessive exercise. This is compulsive exercise, always thinking about exercising or losing weight once consuming food. And it's important to note that most of these symptoms really take hold or take shape when they start to interfere with your daily life. So when we say excessive, that is subjective, but it's really once a participant feels like it's interfering with your daily functioning. Muscle building, this is taking steroids to get more muscular, again, in a way that's interfering with daily life. And then finally, something that in and of itself is not necessarily an eating disorder, but clusters with different eating disorder symptoms and is important to measure are negative attitudes about obesity. These are anti-fat beliefs or weight stigma attitudes that one might hold. And so you can see there across the eight, you do have a mix between these more psychological or cognitive variables, as well as the behavioral ones. Okay, jumping into our first project, and this is the measurement project, we asked, do the questions of the EPSI work the same way for different LGBTQIA groups? So if the questionnaire works differently for different groups, it's difficult to make comparisons, which is really important, especially when we put these measures into large surveys and we're interested in understanding who's most at risk for what eating disorder symptom. So we tested essentially whether the same questions mean the same thing across groups. And we used a statistical technique called confirmatory factor analysis and measurement invariance. So we went through a few different steps in order to determine how confident we could be about comparing these symptoms across groups. Okay, so the way we structured this project is that we separated it into two different papers. We had one paper that focused on cisgender gay men and lesbian women. And then we had a second paper that focused on transgender men, transgender women, and gender diverse individuals. And so in each of those papers, we're comparing them against the other groups in that particular paper. So that's important to keep in mind as we're interpreting the results. And so what we found is that the questionnaire worked the same way across cisgender gay men and cisgender lesbian women, and transgender men, transgender women, and gender diverse people. So why this matters is because it means we can make group comparisons, and those group comparisons are more trustworthy. And it reduces the risk that this is simply a measurement problem. And so we can be more confident that our comparisons are not distorted in some way, shape, or form. Which actually leads us directly into project two, which is what do typical eating disorder symptom scores look like in different groups? So we published what is called a community norms paper in order to make these comparisons. And this is essentially, we're not looking at whether scores are good or bad, but these are essentially reference values. And so this is, we're interested in how scores tended to look in LGBTQIA plus groups. Or which groups tended to endorse certain symptoms at a higher rate than other groups. And this helps us interpret results using the right comparison. And so again, we separated the two papers into looking specifically at cisgender, sexual minority, or LGBT plus adults. And so in this first paper, we were, because of the statistical analysis we were using, we were able to include bi plus participants as well. We were not able to in the first set because of statistical power reasons. We weren't able to run the necessary technique that we needed to. But in this one, we were able to include bi plus adults. So we compared cisgender gay men, lesbian women, bi plus men, bi plus women. And we found that different groups showed different patterns. So we found that bi plus women, for example, endorsed higher levels of body dissatisfaction, binge eating, and restricting their food intake compared to other cisgender, sexual minority, LGBT plus adults. And then we also found that bi plus men endorsed higher excessive exercise than other groups. And gay men endorsed higher muscle building and held negative attitudes towards obesity, or at least endorsed those items at a higher rate than other groups. And then for the transgender, gender diverse paper, we found that transgender men endorse muscle building behaviors at a higher rate than transgender women and gender diverse individuals and transgender women endorse restricting excessive exercise and negative attitudes towards obesity. Okay. Um, so how do these patterns look different across the lifespan or across age ranges? It's important to note before I go into this project is that this was based on a cross-sectional survey. So just one like moment in time, we weren't looking at how these symptoms changed over the lifespan. So we can think about this in terms of age. We can also think about this in terms of generational differences. It's just something to keep in mind is that we actually didn't follow the same participants over their lifespan. So for project 3, how do these patterns look across the lifespan? In June of last year, the New York Times published a really interesting article, and it was on eating disorder symptoms and eating disorder diagnoses in middle-aged and older adults. And this is underexamined in the field, to say the least. We mostly focus on teen or college age or adolescents as our primary sample for eating disorder research. And so middle-aged and older adults are oftentimes neglected. And this is especially true in the LGBTQIA plus community. So we were already working on this project, and then the New York Times published this article kind of raising awareness about this issue. And what they found when they were interviewing people is that mostly cisgender straight women were struggling with their relationship with food for most of their life and didn't have access to care. And so when they were younger, and so these symptoms and challenges they carried these challenges with them for their entire life up into older adulthood. So this is a really important issue and one that more researchers hopefully will focus on in the future. And so for what we were able to do, we tested how these symptoms vary across adulthood and whether age patterns differed by groups. All right. So for cisgender sexual minority adults, again, this included cisgender gay men, lesbian, and bi plus individuals. We found that older age was associated with lower body dissatisfaction, binge eating, and muscle building. So the older the participant was in our sample, the less likely they were to report muscle building behaviors, binge eating, and being dissatisfied with their body. However, we did find that the older the participant was, the more likely they were to endorse cognitive restraint when it comes to eating food or negative attitudes towards obesity. And this is a theme that we'll also see in the next slide as well. We'll see that theme continued. We did see one unique pattern with bi plus women. So whereas most of the sample, these symptoms decreased over time, specifically for body dissatisfaction and binge eating, we saw that bi plus women were pretty stable, that they didn't show the same decline over time, or with age, I should say. So we found similar results in our transgender and gender diverse paper. So older age was associated with higher cognitive restraint and negative attitudes towards obesity. In terms of a different pattern per group, we did find that transgender women showed a sharper age-related decline in purging compared to gender diverse participants. Although I should note that purging was not widely endorsed in any of the communities or samples. And so while this was statistically significant, there needs to be more research in this particular area, especially given there wasn't a high endorsement of purging in our sample. So the main takeaway here is that age does not solve eating disorder symptoms. Some cognitive and attitudes about eating components can even intensify with age. Again, age or potentially a generational or cohort effect. Okay, so main takeaways, what did we learn? There's three main takeaways. The first is the EPSI works comparably across major LGBTQIA subgroups. This supports fair comparison for future researchers that are interested in using this measure in different research studies they may be conducting. There's not one single LGBTQIA plus eating disorder pattern. Different groups, as we saw, show different symptom clusters. And age is an important variable. Behavioral symptoms of eating disorders may decline in some groups, while restraint and anti-obesity attitudes can rise with age. And so generally, the work from this study is we are working toward better measurement. We have better interpretation of those measurements now, and hopefully better screening and support for our communities. And so what this means for our communities generally, screening and conversation, screenings with your medical provider and conversations should include symptoms like restricting eating and purging, absolutely. But they should also include binge eating, compulsive exercise, and muscle building behaviors. We should also avoid a one-size-fits-all messaging. So we should tailor support and prevention to symptom clusters that show up in different groups. And we should also normalize help seeking across the lifespan. And so older adults may also be struggling with their relationship with food and their body. And if someone recognizes themselves in any of these patterns, that's enough reason to talk to a clinician about your relationship with food. And there's also resources in the next few slides as well. Some future directions for this area of research, stuff that we're interested in pursuing next in the next year. Right now, we are working on validating brief screeners, which can be used in clinical settings. So, as I'm sure you can guess, it's not feasible for everyone to fill out a 45-item eating disorder symptom measure every time they go to a doctor's appointment. So, there is a 10-item version of the EPSI. It's called the base. And we're working on validating that in certain LGBTQIA plus groups right now. And so this will hopefully help get these screeners into more professional settings. We're also looking at how symptoms and access to care may vary at the intersections of race, ethnicity, disability status, income, education, more of a social determinants perspective that could be really insightful. And one of the things that we're most excited about doing, mostly because it is under-examined, to say the least, there's, as far as we know, not any research on it right now is on eating disorders and ACE identities or the ACE spectrum, asexual, gray sexual. And so we'd like to expand the research projects that we're doing into identities that are absent from most data sets. And so multiple studies have linked asexual identity to higher depression, anxiety risk, and minority stress experiences. And we know those pressures can spill into eating disorder symptoms. And so we should not assume that the risk is lower. The mix of symptoms might look different for ACE individuals or individuals on the ACE spectrum. Some ACE individuals may have less dating-driven appearance pressures, but they might also have more symptoms that are tied to stress and isolation or body discomfort. And so we just don't know until we do the research. So that's a really important next step for us. And finally, moving beyond cross-sectional patterns and more toward designs that can capture change over years or even over shorter periods of time. So that's a really important next step for our research team. And again, I'd like to thank all of our co-authors, collaborators, and acknowledge everyone at the Pride Study, staff, participants, other researchers. And if anything today resonated, here is additional resources. You can get more information about eating disorder treatment, symptoms. Um, yeah, so thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to talking through your questions.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Christopher. Please join me in lighting up the Zoom screen with your emojis and appreciation and virtual claps and snaps and throwing virtual glitter. Really appreciate, I feel like we were front row in a master class in breaking down what eating disorder symptoms are and some of these really groundbreaking findings in LGBTQI plus communities. I want to emphasize that, this portfolio of research that Dr. Otmar and the team, Dr. Nagata, have been presenting, that this is also just a sliver of the prolific body of research they've published. The link that Elle put in the chat will be able to show you from just the papers that were published in 2025, but there's many, many more, both at the Pride Studies research website as well as outside of the Pride Study that this amazing team has done. I'm going to invite folks to go ahead and ask any questions that you might have. Feel free to type in the chat. You can also use the Q&A function, whatever works best for you. One question on my end, and kind of thinking about your expertise within social health and interpersonal communication, in seeing these findings, that, in looking at like tools and how we can be culturally competent, but after testing them and seeing these early findings, was there anything that stood out to you from kind of a social health perspective? So when you're talking about the future directions that you're particularly interested in diving into more, or even have theories about like looking into more?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the theories that I'm really interested in testing is the interpersonal model of binge eating. And so, specifically, uh, it kind of suggests that interpersonal stressors in our everyday life trigger short-term stress or coping, and sometimes people use food in order to cope. And so I'm particularly interested in looking at how different types of interpersonal stressors, specifically in certain LGBTQ communities, might be at certain risks for different types of interpersonal stressors, whether it may be individual social behavior like social withdrawal, or maybe conflict with peers or family conflict or stressors at work, and how this might lead to binge eating symptoms over time, and how there might be protective factors or buffers that can help individuals. So that's where my current research is going, looking at social health as a predictor of certain eating disorder symptoms. So that's a great question. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's, I think, really interesting. And what I really appreciate about this body of research is the many different lenses and perspectives that you all are taking and looking at this, because it's such a important issue within our communities. That's, as you said, has been understudied. So you all are really breaking grounds in really important areas. Um, the other question that I have, I feel like I really appreciate these webinars because it's also an opportunity to get to know a little bit more personally the
Mhm.
researchers behind the work, and for some participants to like have more of an understanding. If you don't mind sharing a little bit more about how you got involved as a postdoctoral fellow within this research and this project, and kind of overall what that experience was like for you.
Yeah, so my background is in human communication, and specifically, I got really into quantitative methods and structural equation modeling, all kind of the way we measure human behavior and social processes. And so I was also looking in using that kind of specialty in an applied setting. So, Dr. Jason Nagata had this postdoc open. He was looking for someone that specialized in the type of modeling I was interested in. And yeah, it was just kind of a happy coincidence that he was looking for what I had. I was looking for the type of experience he was offering. Um, and so much of my research kind of revolves around rumination, social exclusion, which all relate to binge eating. And yeah, so that's kind of how I got involved here. It's how I ended up from Santa Barbara to San Francisco.
Well, fantastic. We're happy to have you in the Bay Area. And thanks for sharing a little bit more about your journey. We appreciate it. Um, I do see that just looking through real quick. Oh, okay. So someone did ask a question. I'm going to kind of anonymize it a little bit. Um, so someone is studying weight inclusive healthcare as a transgender, diverse, and intersex outreach specialist. They're wanting to study more on the relationship between those who may have body dysmorphia diagnosis and also a gender dysphoria experience and the relationship between the two. Do you have any thoughts on this based off of your research?
We did not measure that specifically. I do know these things, these challenges that people experience can compound and intersect, as we saw with, having a minoritized identity plus experiencing stigma and how this can increase our risk for eating disorder symptoms. But no, we didn't measure that specifically. I don't have any data on that, but it's a great question. And there are a lot of amazing researchers in our field doing that type of work, though. Yeah,
Yeah, thanks so much. And I'm not sure the person in the chat, um, if you are a researcher and you're interested in, researching within that, feel free. If you're, we'll post some links in the chat about ways to collaborate with the Pride Study on doing more research and looking into, specific research questions within the LGBTQIA plus community. Fantastic. Well, I think that was our final question that we had from the audience. Please join me again in a virtual round of applause and snaps and deep appreciation for Dr. Christopher Otmar for all of the research that you do, all of the amazing work, and especially for spending time with us today here on Friday to share these findings back and sharing them in a way that I myself, as not, a clinical expert or researcher, could understand. Really appreciated it.
thank you.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and close us out. My colleague Elle is going to launch a poll. We do kindly request you take a few minutes to complete the poll. I always say on these webinars it wouldn't be a Pride Study event if we weren't using an opportunity to collect data. In this case, this data is helping us to inform how we can improve future webinars. If folks are appreciating these, should we continue? Are there things that we could be doing different or better? So if you take a few minutes, we deeply appreciate it. Also, we invite you to stay connected with us. You can follow us across social media platforms. We're at the Pride Study. We also have a newsletter. So if you sign up for a newsletter, you'll get updates when we publish new research, as well as when we have events like the webinar that we're having today. And lastly, if you want to contact us about either collaboration opportunities or anything else, our email address is pridenetconnect@stanford.edu. And thanks so much to Elle, who has put into the chat the link to sign up for our newsletter as well, so you could stay up to date with all the PrideNet and Pride Study happenings. And also, we invite you to get involved with the Pride Study in any and all ways that interest you. So if you're not already a participant and you're interested in joining, we have the QR code on the screen as well as the link in the chat where you can learn more about becoming a participant. If you're a researcher, and I know there were some folks on in the chat expressing different research interests, and you're interested in collaborating with the Pride Study, possibly looking at data or longitudinal data, or launching a novel questionnaire, a new questionnaire, like Dr. Otmar's team, then you can learn more on our Collaborate page and that link on the chat as well. And lastly, if you have the means and if you want to make a donation to the Pride Study to help make sure that LGBTQIA plus health research persists during these challenging times, we also have more information about that on our QR code and on our link. In closing, just wanted to say a huge thank you to all of our attendees today and across all days of the Pride Study Wrapped webinar series. It was truly special to be in community with you all. And thank you to all of our presenters, all of our participants, and our partners. We couldn't do this work without you. We appreciate you, and we look forward to being in touch again very soon. Have a good rest of your day and a great weekend, everyone. Thanks so much.